네, 2023 서울국제 안심소득 포럼 2일차.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second day of the Seoul International Forum on Safety Income 2023. Once again, good morning. I am announcer Cho Ju-yeon, your MC for today's event.
네, 오늘도 2일차이고.
So today is the second day of the forum, and I think the weather is even colder. So I would like to thank everyone for joining us very early in the morning. At the Seoul International Forum on Safety Income, we are exploring ways to develop the Korean welfare model, Seoul Safety Income, together with scholars from home and abroad. Today, we have a meaningful program prepared for you to pave the way forward for the income security system. We look forward to your interest and participation. So we will now begin the first part of our program, which is the special session. During today's special session, we will launch the Global Income Security Network, and we have prepared this as a way to share the meaning and vision and our commitments for global income security. The Global Income Security Network is being launched with the purpose of solving income gap and poverty problems. It is a network that systemizes international cooperation among major cities and research institutes working on an income guarantee policy experiment. Through this network, the city of Seoul, through mutual cooperation and sharing of research data with each city and institution, hopes to expand research so that the safety income pilot project can be introduced in Korea. Furthermore, Seoul will work together with other cities to find solutions to build a future welfare model. And now let's take a look at a video.
Poverty persists across generations, leading to an expanding income disparity. Support is needed to shine a light on welfare blind spots. To explore better solutions to the challenges the current welfare system faced, the Seoul metropolitan government embarked on a journey to test out new ideas. Seoul Safety Income Project provides more assistance to those in need. The international community is testing out various guaranteed income projects. In a U.S. study, people experienced improved health with reduced depression and anxiety. They also became financially stable and found better jobs. In European experiments in countries like Finland, the Netherlands, and Spain, people responded with positive feedback, saying they felt more satisfied and happier with life. The Seoul metropolitan government and other countries initiated the Seoul Safety Income Project in July 2022, the first policy experiment on income security in Korea, providing financial support to 1,600 households until 2025. The Seoul Safety Income Project is designed to prioritize providing more income support to low-income households. The project covers half of the income gap compared to the standard income. By simplifying the stringent process, the project is designed to address welfare blind spots by expanding eligibility criteria, increasing income support, strengthening the social safety net, and boosting household income through increased work efforts. It has been 1 year since the Seoul Safety Income Project began. How have the lives of Seoul citizens changed?
갑자기 허리가 아파져서 일을 못하게 됐어요. 돈은 없는데 반지하집이 있다고 기초생활수급도 안 해주더라고요. 안심소득 지원받아서 치료도 하고 다시 일할 수 있게 돼서 너무 좋습니다.
기술교육원에서 한 1년 정도 창업 교육을 받았습니다. 근데 1년 넘게 수입이 없다 보니까 창업을 포기할까 계속 고민했죠. 그래도 안심소득 덕분에 공과금도 내고 또 차근차근 계획한 대로 창업 준비할 수 있었습니다.
몸이 안 좋았는데 빌딩 경비원으로 취직할 수 있었어요. 아내랑 아들이랑 같이 사니까 수입은 부족한데 안심소득이 아들 교육비에 보탬이 됐죠. 덕분에 아들도 취업을 했고 이제 수급 생활에서 벗어날 수 있었습니다.
Compared to those in the control group, households receiving safety income have seen a rise in basic necessities like food and medical costs. Their mental health has also improved, with decreased depression and stress. Furthermore, over 20% of these households have experienced an increase in earned income. In this way, the Seoul Safety Income Project acts as a robust safety net, addressing gaps in current welfare and enhancing the will to live. Seoul's welfare extends beyond Korea to share with the world. We are working towards a future where everyone can have a stable life by building a global income security network with cities and research institutes worldwide. A solution for establishing sustainable welfare model for those in need. Seoul Safety Income Project.
네, 감사합니다. 오늘 서울의
Thank you
새로운
very much.
보장 제도가
We hope that Seoul's new income security system will be developed on a more international level through the launch of the Global Income Security Network. Today, to mark the launch of the Global Income Security Network, cities and organizations that are participating in the first agreement are now on the stage. I would like to introduce each of them to you. First, from Los Angeles, we have Aaron Strauss, Senior Program Manager of Community Wealth Initiative.
Thank you very much. 그리고는 저희 시카고에서도 참여를 해주셨습니다. 미국 시카고시의 가족지원서비스부에서 마크 샌더스 부국장님께서 참여해 주셨습니다. And Mr. Mark Sanders, thank you very much. 이어서 스탠포드 대학교 기본소득 연구소에서 션 클라인 소장님도 참여해 주셨습니다. And Director Mr. Sean Klein, thank you very much. 네, 그리고 이어서 펜실베니아대로 가봅니다. 미국 펜실베니아대 소득보장연구센터의 앨리슨 탐슨 행정국장님 참여해 주셨습니다. Ms. Allison Thompson, thank you very much for your time. 네, 이제 마지막으로 이번 세부 보장 네트워크
Last but not least, we have the Welfare Policy Office of the Seoul Metropolitan Government, which is launching the Global Income Security Network. Soo-hyun Lee, head of the Welfare Policy Division.
네, 그럼 바로 이어서
Next, we will have the network launch declaration and welcome speech, which will share the direction of the Global Income Security Network in order to promote the global income experiment.
of the inaugurating the global network and some welcome remarks. 네트워크 출범 선언은 서울특별시 이수연 복지정책실장님께서
The network launch declaration will be delivered by Soo-hyun Lee, head of welfare policy of the Seoul Metropolitan Government.
네, 포럼에 참석해 주신 여러분.
I would like to welcome all of you to the forum and to the representatives of cities and research institutes that are participating in the Global Income Security Network, which is being launched in Seoul. I'm Soo-hyun Lee from the Seoul Metropolitan Government's Welfare Policy Division. Seoul, a city that goes together with the vulnerable, launched the Seoul Safety Income Project in July last year to find new welfare solutions to alleviate deepening income disparities and to resolve welfare blind spots. At this second Seoul International Forum on Safety Income 2023, we will announce the establishment of a global income security network and establish a research cooperation system for the development of income security policies with cities and research institutes around the world that are conducting various income experiments and research. we declare the launch of the Global Income Security Network, pledging to actively work and cooperate with each other for the development of a sustainable society in which the basic lives of all citizens is guaranteed with humanitarian concern for a future welfare system that can give hope to us all. Soo-yeon Lee, Head of Welfare Policy, Seoul Metropolitan Government.
네, 세계적 차원의 연대와 협력이
Thank you very much for declaring the launch of the Seoul Security Network, Global Income Security Network, and for delivering the meaningful message. Now let us begin the ceremony of the inauguration, and we will first hear from Los Angeles. We would like to ask the Aaron Strauss, Senior Program Manager, to give his remarks.
Thank you very much. I'll start off by saying it's a true pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the Seoul Metropolitan Government's hospitality. We've all had a fantastic experience so far in your beautiful city. I'm very encouraged that governments, research institutes, and other partners around the world are responding to this particular economic moment with such innovative, forward-thinking policy that really puts the people we serve first. I think that's vital, and I'm very grateful to see that happening here in various places across the world and in the United States. We're very excited to be joining this community. We look forward to learning alongside all of you, to sharing knowledge and experience in service of those that we care most about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your kind words. 네, 선구자적인 이런 정책들을
We are establishing this network of leading organizations and cities. Next, let's hear from Chicago, Deputy Commissioner of Chicago Department of Family and Support Services, Mark Sanders.
Deputy Commissioner Mr. Mark Sanders, please.
Thank you. Again, we are very grateful for the invitation to attend the Seoul International Forum on Economic Safety. You all have been extremely gracious hosts, and we again appreciate the hospitality you have shown us since we've arrived. This MOU signing ceremony symbolizes the fulfillment of one of the major goals of the Chicago Resilient Communities Pilot, to build the field of practice in what we in Chicago call the Guaranteed Basic Income Workspace. While each of our programs are uniquely tailored to the needs of the participants we serve in different parts of the globe, I believe they share a common theme, the belief that human beings deserve to have their basic needs met, and that government leaders must act courageously and embrace innovative approaches in how we support the residents and the communities that we serve. And that data, both qualitative data as well as data collected through rigorous scientific analytical research, must be used as a guide in the design of programs and policies we implement to meet our community's needs. The City of Chicago and DFSS has committed to using the lessons learned from our first round of our Chicago Resilient Communities Pilot as we enhance and expand our program in 2024. We look forward to learning with this group and sharing with this community as we continue to fulfill our mission to connect individuals and families and to resources, and in this case, financial resources that build stability, support their well-being, and empower them to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your opening remarks. 네, 좋은 말씀 감사합니다. 앞으로 시카고시에서도 굉장히 많은 보탬이 돼 주실 거라고 믿어 의심치 않습니다. 네, 그럼 이어서 미국 스탠퍼드 대학교
We can look forward to the active contribution and participation of Chicago City. Next, we would like to invite Mr. Sean Klein.
Director Mr. Sean Klein from the Stanford Basic Income Lab, please.
I'm honored to be with you all this week and to sign this MOU outlining our partnership today. As an institution that undertakes research and convenes stakeholders around the philosophy, economics, politics, and implementation of basic income and related cash policies, I'm excited that the Stanford Basic Income Lab can be a part of this innovative new collaboration with the municipal governments of Seoul, Chicago, and Los Angeles, and the Center for Guaranteed Income Research. This partnership offers an opportunity to collaborate on the analysis and presentation of data from the groundbreaking Seoul Safety Income Project, Seoul's trailblazing cash transfer experiment to boost economic security and well-being, and other programs. We have a wonderful opportunity to shine a spotlight on how programs like the SSIP can support struggling residents and modeling a way of testing and scaling policy solutions. Thank you all for inviting me, and again, I'm honored to be here and to be a part of this partnership.
Thank you very much, and the honor is all ours. 네, 좋은 말씀 감사합니다. 그럼 스탠포드에서 마지막으로는 펜실베니아.
So we'll move on to Pennsylvania. We would like to invite Ms. Allison Thompson for her remarks.
Now, Executive Director Ms. Allison Thompson, please.
Thank you. I want to echo sentiments that have already been said, which is a hearty thank you for your hospitality, for the invitation to come to the Seoul International Forum on Safety Income of 2023. It has been a delight and an honor and a pleasure to hear about the great work that is taking place in Seoul, to hear about the rigorous research being done through the Seoul Safety Income Project, and to collaborate and think through how we might further our partnership together. So as the Executive Director of the Center for Guaranteed Income Research at the School of Social Policy and Practice at the University of Pennsylvania, I thank you for inviting us here, and I'm thrilled to be part of the Global Income Security Network today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 네, 감사합니다. 네, 그럼 지금부터는 세계
So thank you very much. Let us now begin the signing ceremony of the Global Income Security Network, which contains a blueprint for international cooperation to alleviate global poverty and income gap. The agreement is in front of you right now. There are organizations whose representatives were unable to attend today's ceremony. The two representative cities, Los Angeles and also Research Institute, the University of Pennsylvania's Income Research Center. We actually received electronic signatures in advance, and we've entered them into the agreement.
Please check whether the signatures are already done in the respective areas. 네, 에론 스트라우스 프로그램 매니저님과 앨리슨 톰슨 행정국장님께서 서명이 제대로 되었는지 확인을 해 주시겠습니다. 그럼 그 외에 다른 분들께서는 협약서에 지금
So, Program Manager Aaron Strauss and Administrative Director Allison Thompson, representative of both organizations who attended the event, please check where the signature is properly signed on the agreement. So please now, representative of the organizations who attend the agreement ceremony, please sign the agreement now.
네, 다 완료하셨을까요? 네.
So, have you finished signing?
네, 그럼 다시 한번 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다.
So please give everyone a big round of applause.
바로 협약식에 참여해 주신 관계자분들.
So we are now going to have a commemorative photo. So we will take photos 2 times.
Photos. First with our agreement, and now please stand with your agreement towards the cameraman in the center. 네, 중앙에 있는 카메라를 향해 협약서를 들고 서 주시고요. Mr. Aaron Strauss, we ask you to please hold up the agreement as well so that we can show it to the photo. Thank you. Yes. 같이 들고. 네, 알겠습니다. 네, 사진 촬영 진행하겠습니다. 네. So please smile for the photo. 네, 활짝 웃어 주시면 되겠습니다. 두 번째도 촬영을 곧 이어서 할 텐데요. 한 번 더 찍을까요? 좋습니다. 네, 이제 앞으로 모셔서 다시 촬영하겠습니다. So please now step in front of the table. You can put your agreements down in front of the table, please. 네, 앞으로 모시도록 하겠습니다. And if you remember yesterday, we did our fighting pose. Your right arm up with fists up as well. 네, 협약서는 내려놓으시고 이제 오른손 들고 화이팅 포즈로 부탁드리겠습니다. Going together. Okay. Let's say going together. 하나, 1, 2, 3. Going together. 네, 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 한 번 더 촬영하겠습니다. 앞에서. 네, one more photo please. Thank you very much. And now you may return to your seats. Thank you very much for your cooperation. 이제 자리로 다시 모시도록 하겠습니다. 네, 그럼 이것으로 세계 소득 보장 네트워크
With this, we will be concluding the special session of the Global Income Security Network launch. We kindly ask the participants of the ceremony to go back to their seats. With this, we will be concluding the special session. We will now take a short break in order to prepare the stage for session 3. We will be reorganizing the stage and begin the third session. Promptly, we kindly ask you to take a break for a short moment.
네, 이제 세션 진행을 위해
The stage is now ready for session 3. We will proceed on to the final session of the 2023 Seoul International Forum on Safety Income. The final session will be a series of in-depth presentations and discussions on the topic of the role of governments in reducing income inequality and alleviating poverty. Before we get started, I would like to introduce our panelists on the stage. First, our moderator for this session. He is a world-renowned academic with a strong track record of academic excellence in econometrics. He is the chairman of the organizing committee of the Global Economist Conference, which will be held in Seoul in 2025. Professor Yoon Jae-hwang.
네, 이어서 세션 발표를 맡아주시겠습니다. 어제
Next,
인사 프로그램의 세션 패널로도 참석을 해주셨는데요.
the presenter of this session, who was a panelist in yesterday's session, will be joining online Professor Craig Riddle, Professor Emeritus of Economics, University of British Columbia.
네, 다음으로 5분의 패널
Next, I would like to introduce our 4 panelists.
응용연구센터인 펜실베니아
Five panelists. First,
행정국장을 맡고 계시는 앨리슨
Allison Thompson, Executive Director of Penn Center for Guaranteed Income Research.
네, 이어서 사회실험, 자연실험으로 정책의 효과를 분석하는
Next, an economist at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, Hyun-Chul Kim, an economist who uses social and natural experiments to analyze the effects of policies. Professor Lee Bong-ju, a professor of social work at Seoul National University, who has served as Dean of the College of Social Sciences and Chairman of the Korean Council of Social Work Education. Professor Min Se-jin, Professor of Economics at Dongguk University, who is a member of the President's Committee of Economic Advisors and a member of the Chosunilbo Readers' Rights Committee. Lastly, we have with us from the Sylvan Group, Managing Partner and Global Board of Directors of Resilient Cities Network, Kyung-sun Chung. I would now like to turn the microphone over to Professor Yoon Jae-hwang to continue with session 3.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As introduced, I am the moderator of this session. I'm from Seoul National University, a professor of economics. And this session is titled Global Income Security Network, International Cooperation to Address Poverty Alleviation and this is government's role in income inequality and poverty alleviation. And so we'll have presentations and then we'll also have discussions. And if you have any questions about today's presentations, please hold your questions until the very end. And we are now going to invite the presenter for this session. I would like to invite presenter Craig Riddle, the Emeritus Professor of Economics, University of British Columbia. The title of his presentation is Reducing Poverty, Income Inequality, the Pros and Cons of NIT. Professor Riddle, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. As I said yesterday, I'm delighted to be able to participate in this important gathering and event, but unfortunately a neck injury has made it impossible for me to be there in person. So I hope you'll be able to enjoy nonetheless what I have to tell you this afternoon. So I'm going to be, next slide please. I'm going to be covering 2 recent papers that I've done with my son, Chris Riddell, as you saw on the title page. And I'm going to begin with some just general comments about about the recent interest in basic income and universal basic income. Much of this was covered yesterday, so I'll be very brief here. First of all, there's lots of evidence of growing interest in these 2 concepts, whether it's a BI or a UBI. There's enormous interest around the world, both in the less developed countries and in the developed countries in these 2 these the, these approaches to reducing poverty and reducing inequality. Next slide, please. One important distinction that was discussed yesterday was conditional versus unconditional, but another important distinction in the types of policies that was also mentioned yesterday is whether it should be universal or income tested. Now, a number of highly credible scholars have looked at this issue. I'll point you in particular to the recent report of the expert panel on basic income for the province of British Columbia, where I live in Canada. And they carried out a very thorough and careful simulation looking at how costly it would be to run a universal basic income versus an income tested basic income. And they found that for any given reduction in the poverty rate, it's more than twice as costly to do the same thing with a universal than an income tested. In the US, Hoynes and Rothstein, in a well-known paper on basic income, reached a similar conclusion for the US. So I'm going to focus in this talk on income tested basic income policies, because for countries like Canada and the US, and I expect also Korea, those are clearly the preferred choice. Next slide, please. So what's the role of government in an income-tested basic income? Well, first of all, we all, at least many of us, feel that governments have an important role to play in reducing poverty and reducing inequality and bringing about a more fair system. But also a fundamental feature is that an income testing requires use of the personal income tax system. That's because of the confidential nature of personal tax information. The government's role in an IBI really has to be very involved, and I would say it has to be the designer of the policy, although obviously consulting with outside experts, and especially the operator. So we didn't quite finish the last slide. So let me mention in this context, showing an example of the role of government, is Canada's income support support program for seniors. And seniors in this case mean people over the age of 65. If you go back to the early post-war period, to the late 1940s and through the 1950s and even early 1960s, seniors in Canada had the highest poverty rate of any group, any demographic group. For the last 40 or 50 years, seniors have had the lowest poverty rate of any demographic group. And this big change came about with the introduction of programs starting in the 50s with old age security. But a very important step in that was the introduction of a negative income tax for people over 65. It was called the Guaranteed Income Supplement. It was introduced in 1968. It is exactly an NIT design, has a guarantee level and a tax back rate, so that people who have, seniors who have low incomes, their income is brought up. There wasn't much concern about, when it was introduced, about labor supply issues, because most people over 65 didn't work. Although today, with longer lifespans, it's more common for people to be working well into their 70s. But the key point here is that this group of seniors programs, including the Guaranteed Income Supplement, the NIT, were successful in completely reversing the poverty rate among seniors. And seniors now have the lowest poverty rate, and it's in fact young people that have the highest poverty rate. Next slide, please. So given the the renewed interest in basic income or universal basic income, there's been renewed interest in the negative income tax experiments carried out in North America in the late 1960s, but mainly through the early 1970s. There were 4 experiments done in the United States and 1 in Canada. And what I'm going to be doing in this talk is presenting some new evidence on these negative income tax experiments. Now, of course, once we've got more evidence from the ongoing negative income tax experiments that are ongoing today, like in Barcelona or in Seoul, the SSIP in Seoul, we'll know much more about what the effects of a negative income tax would be in the current setting. But these experiments are the only real evidence we have from the past. And they're widely cited because of that. So just a couple of problems to note first. The New Jersey experiment was unfortunately adversely affected by a policy change made in the state of New Jersey shortly after the experiment started that made the treatment group and the control group no longer comparable. That is, the control group was no longer an appropriate counterfactual for the treatment group. And that produces biases of unknown size and direction. So you can kind of, although there's still a final report and people still refer to this experiment, it was the first after all, you can't rely on the evidence from that. The rural experiment seems to have been fine, but it's doesn't tell you much about, it doesn't have much external validity for settings outside of rural ones, and it has very small sample sizes. So we're going to focus in our work, and we have focused in our work on the 3 later experiments in Gary, Indiana, in Seattle and Denver, and in Manitoba. Next slide, please. Now, evidence from these experiments has been very extensively discussed and examined. There's a well-known review by Widerquist. He cited more than 200 published studies. There's also detailed final reports from all of the 4 US experiments. And by detailed, we had to read a lot of this stuff in this work. The SIMDIME, as it's called, their Seattle-Denver final report, is well over 200 pages. And then there's many other supporting documents that they refer to. So there's a lot of stuff in there. A lot of results and analysis. Unlike the US experiments, the 4 US experiments, there's no final report for MINCOM. MINCOM was a joint initiative of the federal government and the provincial government, but when it started, it had a budget that was fixed in nominal dollars. That is, it wasn't adjusted for inflation. This was a period of high inflation, the early 70s, 2 very severe recessions in North America. And that's when we first had the experience of stagflation. And when the experiment ended, the governments, meanwhile, had changed. The federal government had changed from a liberal, left-leaning government to a more conservative government. And the provincial government had changed from a left-leaning provincial government to a more conservative government. And neither of those governments were interested in poverty reduction or in guaranteed annual income. Now, in fairness to them, there were a lot of other problems at that time. The stagflation, high inflation rates, and high unemployment rates were a major challenge. But what the result was, they shut down MINCOM when the experiment ended. There was no final report, and the data all remained in hard copy form. Now, a number of years later, the federal government was a bit embarrassed about the money that's spent on MINCOM, and nothing had come of it. So they made some funds available to set up a center in Manitoba, which digitized some of the data and tried to encourage its use by academics and other outside researchers. However, by this time, interest in poverty reduction and a guaranteed income concept or negative income tax had definitely waned. There were other things on the agenda. So there was only one study of the labor supply and other effects of MINCOM, and that was not in an academic journal. It was a monograph released by a think tank supported by the federal government. And that's this Hammond-Simpson study that I'll refer to subsequently as well. What this means is that MINCOM is really substantially under-researched compared to the 4 US experiments. Next. Next. Yeah. So most of the presentation is going to focus on 2 recent studies with my son Chris, as I mentioned. The first one I'll call R&R1, and there's the title of it, Welfare versus Work Under a Negative Income Tax. And it's coming out soon in the Journal of Labor Economics. And it deals with single parents. Now, single parents were the main group, they're mainly single mothers, and they were the main group eligible for welfare in both Canada and the US at the time. In fact, in the US, they were, in most states, the only group eligible for welfare. In Canada, welfare was also possible for single men and women, but they were most of the people on welfare in the 1970s were single mothers. The second paper, The Pros and Cons of a Negative Income Tax, New Evidence from Old Experiments, deals with 2-parent families. So those are the 2 major groups studied in the negative income tax experiment. Only one of the 5 experiments had single men and women, and they were a fairly small fraction of the overall population in the experiment. So what the first point is that we found serious problems with the only previous study of MINCOM. Even the sample sizes we couldn't make sense of. The authors, we contacted the authors, their data no longer available that they used. The code's no longer available, so it's not possible to replicate their work. But we find that there's just their work lacks credibility. We can't even make sense of the sample sizes. I could go into more details if people are interested. So basically, there's no credible previous evidence on labor supply or other impacts for MINCOM, although the Hammond-Simpson evidence gets cited a lot because it's the only evidence for MINCOM. We also found some serious problems with 2 of the existing US experiments. We found that the Gary experiment and the Seattle part of the Syme-Dime experiment both failed balance tests. So the samples, although the experiments were intended to be randomly assigning families to treatment and controls, they didn't. The resulting samples are not balanced. That is, they did not achieve randomization. And that's true for single-parent families. It's true for 2-parent families. Now, that's kind of surprising and shocking. People have been referring to these for a long time. I could talk more about what I think the reasons are behind that in the discussion period, if that's of interest. What we do note is that the failure of random assignment in these 2 cities appears to be linked to the fact that the primary industry in both Gary, Indiana, and Seattle, Washington, there was a collapse, a really major collapse during the recession right at the time when these 2 experiments were beginning. And that seems to have caused a lack of balance between the treatment group and the control group. So only the Denver and the Manitoba experiments are likely to yield credible estimates. Next slide, please. So we heard yesterday about Milton Friedman being an early advocate. I'm going to talk first about the single-parent case of NIT. He viewed NIT as a replacement for existing welfare and other income support programs. But the evidence on labor supply impacts for single parents doesn't support it. The evidence for single parent doesn't show any reduction in labor supply or reduction in labor force participation. Next. However, when we looked carefully at the 2 NITs that have credible data, Denver or DIME and MINCOM, we find important heterogeneity in the impacts between welfare recipients, people who were mainly on welfare before random assignment, and workers, people who were mainly employed before random assignment. And in particular, we find that in both of these, we find that there was a reduction in work activity among workers, people who were in the workforce, both reduced participation and reduced hours of work, but increased work activity among welfare recipients, people who weren't working, entered the workforce, and people who were, single mothers who were working, increased their hours of work. So we find the kind of evidence of a positive effect on labor supply, both participation and hours of work, that Friedman and others had predicted. Next slide, please. This slide shows the estimates for the full sample, for the welfare full samples on the left, for the welfare recipients in the middle, and for workers on the right. Next slide, please. What we're doing now is working on two-parent families, and we also use some previously untapped income data that we had to digitize ourselves to look at broader issues than labor supply, such as happiness, satisfaction with the marriage, sharing of household tax within the household. Again, Gary and Seattle samples failed bound tests, so we focus on dime and income. We also test for non-random attrition, and we find no evidence of that in dime or income. So these two experiments appear to yield reliable evidence. Next slide. In dime, we find results similar to what are reported in the SIME-DIME final report. I should mention that most evidence you see is for SIME-DIME pooled, but there are some results in the final report for dime alone, and that's what we're using here. In MINCOM, we find that women in two-parent families reduced their hours worked by 23% and employment by 14%. The male's labor supply estimates are also negative, but they're not significantly different from zero. So these are the only credible estimates available from income, and they're quite different than what's currently believed. Next. And here's the table showing those results. I don't have time to go through the table in detail. Next slide, please. We also look at heterogeneity in labor supply effects in both dime and MINCOM, and a remarkable result, this has not been looked at before, is that we find the reductions in labor supply are only in families with young children, that is preschool-aged children, and it's true for both men and women. Next. I'll skip the misreporting. If people are interested in that, I'll come back to it later. Next. We also look at individual and family effects that go beyond labor supply, and I'll have to be brief with this. There was a husband-wife module in MINCOM that's never been digitized, but we were able to do it, or my son was able to do it. And we find increases of happiness that are fairly large, and also for both men and women, that is people in the treatment group compared to the control group. And on sharing of tasks, we find that both parties, especially women, report higher levels of satisfaction with their spouse's contribution. And on agreement with household duties, the estimates point in the same direction. Next. Again, here's the table. I don't have time to go through it, but you can see the magnitudes of the results are pretty substantial. Next slide. We also look at some other effects, individual and family effects, and we find some important impacts on social activities, as well as upgrading education. Our chief measure of social activities is church attendance, which was an important measure of social activity at the time. And we find evidence of men in the treatment group upgrading their education, basically at double the rate compared to the control group. Next. And again, here's the table, which I don't have time to walk you through. But for those that are interested, it's available. Next. Okay, so let me summarize. Interest in research on a basic income or universal basic income has grown dramatically. That's led to renewed interest in the income maintenance experiments. This is particularly relevant because, as I argued, it appears to be the only fiscally realistic approach in developed countries. Surprisingly, we find that two of the key studies, NIT studies in the US, fail balance tests, both in the single parents surveys and in the two-parent data. But we find that the DIME, the Denver part of SIME-DIME and MINCOME pass balance tests and tests for non-random attrition. Next. Our findings for single parent on welfare support the view that NIT provides stronger work incentives than traditional welfare, as well as increasing income for single parents on welfare. For MINCOME, we're providing the first credible evidence of labor supply effects, and they differ quite substantially from what's currently believed. Larger negative labor supply effects, in particular for women. We also look at heterogeneity, and we find that reductions in work activity in both these experiments are almost entirely restricted to families with young children, which raises the question of whether the labor supply effects may not be permanent, but they just be during a particular period in people's lives. We also digitized this previously untapped MINCOME data, and we find the treatment group experienced greater levels of happiness, satisfaction with the marriage, satisfaction with sharing of household tasks, as well as more social activities and educational upgrading. And the final slide. So that is the final slide. Okay. Okay, so I'll end there. Sorry for running a bit over. I look forward to the comments of the other participants and any questions from the audience. Thank you.
Professor Riddle, thank you very much for your presentation. We heard about how negative income tax can help in reducing poverty and income inequality. He talked about the pros and cons of NIT, and in the experiment, how for it to be scientifically used, the government policymakers need to have a will and long-term interest in assessing the outcomes. Next, we will be hearing from our panelists. We have 5 panelists, and so I would like to ask them to speak for 10 minutes each. First, we will be hearing from Alice Thompson, Executive Director of Penn CGIR.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today. My name is Dr. Allison Thompson. I am the Executive Director of the Center for Guaranteed Income Research at the University of Pennsylvania's School of Social Policy and Practice. I bring greetings from our center's co-founders, Drs. Stacia West and Amy Castro. Thank you also, Dr. Riddell, for your presentation about new evidence from old experiments, highlighting new insights from earlier negative income tax experiments. In my comments today, I will extend this discussion to talk about the ways in which several local governments in the U.S. are now using guaranteed income to try and reduce income inequality and alleviate poverty for targeted groups of people. I'll also share a few emerging findings from a couple of our most recent studies. Established in 2020, the Center for Guaranteed Income Research, or CGIR, is an applied research center specializing in cash transfer research, evaluation, pilot design, and narrative change. CGIR provides mixed methods expertise in designing and executing empirical guaranteed income studies that work alongside the existing safety net. CGIR serves as the evaluator for more than 30 guaranteed income programs across the United States and has enrolled more than 19,000 participants in our studies. For most of our experiments, we use a similar research design to facilitate cross-site comparisons, and we typically employ randomized control trials. CGIAR is also the lead evaluation partner for the Mayors for a Guaranteed Income and works closely with governmental teams to conduct applied cash transfer studies used to inform policy and programming. The following today are examples of government-led guaranteed income pilots in the US. First, I'm going to briefly highlight Los Angeles City, California, which my colleague Aaron Strauss spoke about yesterday, so I won't go into it in detail, but I would be remiss if I didn't highlight the incredible work of the City of Los Angeles, who created one of the largest guaranteed income pilots in the United States, leading the nation in bold initiatives aimed at confronting poverty. And I wanted to acknowledge LA City as an exemplar government site. Distinct from LA City is LA County, which is the county in which LA City is located. Supported by the state of California, Los Angeles County launched the Guaranteed Income Pilot Project Breathe to provide its residents the chance to, quote, breathe easier, knowing that they are more financially secure. The program provides 1,000 eligible residents with unconditional disbursements of $1,000 per month for 3 years' time. 1 year into the Breathe pilot, LA County secured additional public funding to provide $1,000 per month for 2 years to 200 youth who had aged out of the county's foster care system. Youth who age out of foster care are those who enter the foster care system as minors or children and do not return to their families of origin or find another permanent living arrangement. At the age of 21, these youth age out of care because they are no longer able to remain in foster care due to their age. It is no surprise that youth who age out of foster care are at higher risk for experiencing poorer well-being outcomes compared to their same-aged peers in the general population. Youth in the general population typically rely on their families for concrete resources and financial support well into their 20s. But youth who age out of foster care often do so without these concrete resources and financial support. And as a result, they are at increased risk for experiencing poor outcomes related to education, employment, economic self-sufficiency, health, and formal systems involvement. LA County is at the forefront of innovation and justice work by piloting a program that gives cash directly to vulnerable youth who have aged out of the formal foster care system. One of the first of its kind, this program seeks to directly address and mitigate the economic vulnerability that youth aging out of foster care face. By providing unconditional cash transfers to these youth, LA County is extending its governmental support for this vulnerable population into early adulthood. Next, I would like to highlight New York State's Office of Children, Youth, and Families, another public government office. The New York Direct Cash Transfer, or DCT pilot, is designed to give $500 per month for 12 months to 150 families reported to the state's Child Protective Services hotline for non-safety well-being concerns. Neglect allegations, which are often proxies for poverty-related stressors, are the #1 reason families are reported to Child Protective Services in the United States. And yet, families reported to Child Protective Services are often referred to case management services, which do not alleviate poverty and are based on an assumption of individual deficit and blame. This mismatch between family need and system response can result in ineffective services and harmful surveillance. The DCT research pilot aims to re-envision this model as part of New York's effort to upstream prevention services through a federally mandated Family First Prevention Services Plan, and above all else, center the dignity and agency of families. The model aims to reduce poverty and builds on the belief that families, not systems, know how to best allocate their resources. Indeed, the goal of the DC pilot is to reduce formal Child Protective Services involvement for families by using cash to ameliorate poverty-related neglect. Next, I want to talk about St. Paul, Minnesota. The People's Prosperity Pilot, or PPP, was the first guaranteed income pilot launched by Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, and the first in the United States to use public dollars for guaranteed income cash transfers since the Seattle-Denver income maintenance experiment of the 1970s that was mentioned earlier. The PPP was launched in October 2020 and gave 150 participants $500 a month for 18 months. The city of St. Paul used a braided funding strategy to implement the PPP, combining funds from the federal Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Securities Act, or CARES, repurposing state dollars from a Minnesota Department of Human Services grant, and securing private funding from individual donors and philanthropic organizations. The PPP was developed with and grounded in the city's broader commitment to a human-centered economic approach, whereby social well-being is elevated over profit and people are centered through worker power and choice. Further, the City of St. Paul piloted the PPP as a subgroup of their Universal College Savings Program, College Bound St. Paul. By doing so, the city innovatively combined an income stabilizing strategy aimed at addressing present income volatility with an asset building strategy designed to increase future savings over time. CGIR served as the evaluation partner for St. Paul's PPP, and we used a quasi-experimental single-sample mixed methods design. In fact, we released our final report for St. Paul on Monday, and it's now available on our website if you'd like to see it. In sum, findings suggest that on average, the cash transfers may serve protectively for recipients during the PPP intervention. Specifically, across many of the financial and savings indicators, PPP participants either remained stable or improved throughout the course of the pilot, but then declined 6 months after the cash stopped, suggesting that GI, or guaranteed income, may have the ability to alleviate present financial hardship, but its continuing impact once cash transfers end may be limited. However, this is interesting. The relationship between guaranteed income and participants' sense of self functioned differently than financial well-being. In addition to an upward trend throughout the PPP intervention, participants still held improved attitudes towards life and its purpose, as well as some aspects of hope and mattering 6 months after the cash disbursements had stopped, suggesting a more enduring power of GI on participants' sense of self. All the while, household stability remained relatively stable, even in the midst of unprecedented pandemic-related stressors during the PPP. Together, these findings challenge dominant narratives of poverty and add to a growing body of literature reimagining the social safety contract. And our last exemplar site is Ulster County, New York. Ulster County provided 100 households in rural upstate New York with direct relief payments of $500 a month for 12 months, with titrated payments for an additional 5 months as the program ended. I should mention that the lead writer of the Ulster report is with us today, Dr. Elizabeth DeYoung. And her findings, her report, indicate that despite the extraordinary stressors of the global pandemic and unprecedented nationwide inflation, the treatment group held steady or improved in many of the primary outcomes measured, while these same outcomes declined for the control group. On average, the treatment group experienced greater improvements in financial health, physical health, housing, and food security compared to the control group. Further, these stable and positive trends among GI recipients held steady even after the cash distributions or the cash disbursements were titrated and then ended. I should mention too that this evaluation was a randomized controlled trial and is available on our website. In closing, we are excited to share a few of these promising emerging findings, and throughout the next couple of years, we look forward to releasing a number of reports from our cross-site evaluation called the American Guaranteed Income Studies. You can find these reports as they are released and available on our website. Thank you.
감사합니다.
Next, we would like to invite Professor Kim Hyun-chul from the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology.
네, 감사드립니다.
So, good morning and thank you very much for the introduction. I would once again join our panelists in thanking Professor Craig Riddell for his presentation. I'm very envious that you are able to write a paper with your son and that paper is going to be in the Journal of Labor Economics. I have a son too, so I hope that I'll be able to write a paper with my son. So you're a very lucky man and I'm very envious. So the topic of this session is government's role in income inequality and poverty alleviation. So we're talking about the government's role. So basic income or NIT, these are the topics that we are discussing. But why are we doing all of this? And why is the government engaging in these activities? I want to ask a very fundamental question. Why is the government doing all of this? And so, what I really want to talk about today is that in our accomplishments in life, 80% is luck. It's given to us. From the World Bank, Branok Minabok in 2015, in his paper, according to that paper, the country that you're born in and the Gini coefficient, if you look at those two indicators, it accounts for about 50% of a person's income. So if you're born into a nice country like Korea, it means that there is a higher possibility that you will live a much more prosperous life. So a country can actually be responsible for 50% of a person's income. And then the next important thing is parents. So of course, they give us their DNA and they also raise us when we're young. In Dartmouth College, Bruce Sethroth, a very famous economist in 2007, looked at how Korean adoptees lived in the United States. And they compared the adoptees to the children of the biological parents. And what found out was that the children of the biological parents who live with the biological parents, they receive the DNA and they also live in the same environment. So he tried to look at, how much environment impacts income and DNA impacts income. And so about 32, apparently 50% is determined by DNA. So parents not only give us our DNA, but they also provide us with the environment in which they raise us. So it's very hard to specify the numbers, but the environment that your country gives you and the environment that your parents give you, it's hard to disentangle these two things. But the environment that your children create for you actually has more of an impact, more than 10%. So scientifically, what has been assessed is 80%. And so the environment, the luck that you come about, like maybe you have a job and that industry develops, maybe you are lucky to get into a good college. So all of this luck apparently impacts our life. My effort, my accomplishments, how much does that account for? So according to my explanation, my effort, it's actually almost at zero. So our lives, it's not based on what I achieve. So it's the environment that is given to us by chance, by luck. So it is the things that are given to us by chance, by luck. And this luck, of course I said luck, maybe some people might say it's a blessing or they might describe it differently. But this luck is not fair. It's not fairly distributed. You might be the son of Bill Gates, or maybe someone will be born into a very impoverished family. Maybe they're exposed to abuse. Is it the child's responsibility? No. So luck is not fair. And so say you have a traffic accident, or maybe you were exposed to violence in school. And it disproportionately affects low-income people and the underprivileged. So what is the role of the government? The government has to try to make this luck a little bit more equitable and protect those people who actually faced this unlucky situation. So this is why we're gathered here today talking about basic income and NIT, because we want to think about how to help those who are in need. So the accomplishments in our life is based on luck, our given environment, given situation. And it's very important to recognize this. If you look at the Republic of Korea, it's a very low welfare, low burden society. And I work in a lot of developing countries. And in those countries, there's no welfare, there's no burden. If you go to Sweden, it's high burden, high welfare. So we haven't really determined in Korea where we want to go. But low share of burden and low welfare is where we are right now. And what we have to think about is, I think the fact that if you're sitting here at this venue or you're watching this conference online, you have achieved something. And you have to remember your achievement is not made by yourself. We have to create a society that is more generous. We have to create a society that shares with other people. So that's what I want to talk about. So I want you to look at this next slide. And we live in a very unequal society. And what is the best way to actually sever this generational sort of inheritance of poverty? And Professor Ekman, who received a Nobel Prize in economics, if you look at this, that's what he created, Heckman's curve. So on the x-axis, there is an age, and then the y-axis, you can see the intervention of a country and what sort of impact it creates. So maybe when they're at school or when they're an adult, when the government makes an impact, it shows the amount of impact you can generate. And impact is usually looked at income level. So the younger the person is, if the government intervenes, the bigger the impact, the bigger the investment outcome. So Heckman's curve, of course, is very well known among economists. And so World Bank or the ADB, where I used to work, a lot of these works that they do is about protecting women who are pregnant and looks at the early childhood of a person. And this science already testifies to this. As we grow older, when we try something new, I know it's really hard to keep up. Your brain just doesn't absorb the data. But children have infinite possibilities. But if they are exposed to, say, neglect or abuse, and the government intervenes and helps them, the impact of this intervention is great. And this is shown through Heckman's curve. And the RCT that the Seoul government is doing, the scientific, credible, revolutionary project that they are doing, shows us the results that we already know. So at very young age, in infancy and childhood, we really need to invest our intervention. So whether it's basic income or NIT, I think that this cash transfer really needs to focus on people who have young children. I really want to emphasize that. So I have 1 minute and 30 seconds left. Can you move on to the next slide? So why do we really need to provide education and care in the infancy and childhood period? If you look at Korea right now and also in the United States, people feel that we should invest more money in private tuition or SAT in high school. And people think that high school is the most important period in guaranteeing their child's success. But if you look at the top part of the graph, this is men. So x-axis is cognitive function and y is non-cognitive function. Cognitive function is about academic skills. Non-cognitive skills is about working hard, self-esteem, emotional stability. So it's about non-academic factors that are very important to our life. So if you compare left and right, in the y-axis you have the income, and you can compare. So you can see that non-cognitive functions, non-academic skills are very important, but we focus too much on these non-cognitive academic, on the cognitive and academic functions. And so non-cognitive functions are very important. So when we target infants and children, we can create, I think, a more equitable society. And I believe that these research results testify to that. So thank you very much. And next, I would like to invite Professor Lee Bong-ju from Seoul National University.
반갑습니다. 서울대학교 사회복지학과의 이봉주입니다.
Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to meet you. I am Bong-ju Lee from Seoul National University. Today, in my discussion, I'm going to be talking about NIT, those programs, and the new research evidence of past NIT experiments. And I would like to talk about the new research evidence of NIT and its implications for Seoul's safety income, SSIP. Next slide, please. First of all, NIT, negative income tax. If I cover the key characteristics once more, it is that it provides higher benefit levels compared to other welfare benefits, and compared to other welfare systems that are more complicated, there isn't a lot of means test or a lot of administrative work that is associated, because it is just about the income. So only the income is calculated, therefore the administrative costs can be reduced, which is a big strength of NIT. Furthermore, it provides inducement to work. So the welfare recipient, they are not just relying on the benefits that they receive, that through such a system, it lays the groundwork for them to work again. It's a strong work incentive, and they are motivated to stand up on their own 2 feet. And compared to the other public welfare systems, those who are receiving such welfare payment and benefits, if they start working, they cannot receive the benefits that they had received in the past, so they are demotivated to work. However, in the case of NIT, even though once NIT is reduced, the benefits are reduced as their income increases, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is a complete cutoff of the welfare that they receive. To a certain level, they can keep it. Therefore, their overall income increases, which induces people to work more. So these are the 3 characteristics of NIT. And at the time when these experiments were carried out, as Professor Riddle explained in detail, the research evidence that we can see is that because a high level of income is guaranteed, there's a positive result in terms of alleviating poverty. And another important outcome is that those who participated in NIT, their well-being increased. So their well-being increased. In particular, investment into education increased, and their health improved, which are important outcomes. However, one of the issues of a past experiment was that regarding the labor supply and its impact, it's mixed, and in some cases we see negative findings on a labor supply. So the expectation is that since NIT encourages work, it is a work incentive, it was expected that work will increase, but the previous evidence did not clearly show this, and this was one of the disadvantages of the past findings. However, as Professor Riddle showed through his new review of the past evidence, can be summarized into 2. First, in terms of labor supply, it is not necessarily negative. We could find out and check that it is not negative. In particular, in terms of labor supply, the past Evidence shows that, in particular, for those who had received long-term welfare, they have a high reliance on the welfare system. Yet for these long-term welfare recipients, their hours worked increased. And second, for single parents, the work activity increased. And for two-parent families, when this group was analyzed, labor supply seemed to be reduced. But when it was thoroughly reviewed in detail, the labor supply was reduced only in families when their children are young, because you wanted to take care of your children, and that is why the labor was reduced. But with children that are above 6 years old, the labor supply increased. So the result of the labor supply reduction that was identified in past findings was understood better, and there was positive impact on well-being. Happiness was increased, and life satisfaction increased. Furthermore, there was increase in education, and these were positive outcomes. So with these new evidence, new findings, what will be the implications for SSIP? So work incentive, that is a major component of NIT, and this could be reconfirmed. So SSIP will be a strong work incentive. So the aim of the policy is not just about providing welfare. It is a policy that supports self-sufficiency, and this will be an important policy goal for SSIP. Second, looking at the new evidence, we were able to reconfirm that there was better well-being for the recipients. And if we think about the ultimate goal of guaranteed income, it is not just about guaranteeing one's income. It is about increasing the well-being of the recipients, and this outcome supports this. Looking at the new evidence, SSIP and NIT, these are income supporting activities, but we see that there needs to be additional services added to these systems. For example, with families that have young children, they cannot increase their labor even though they receive such income. So in this case, you can help by providing childcare services to reduce the childcare burden of the families, and there can be training and education as people look for jobs. And some challenges are, at the moment, SSIP is a pilot project, but if this is rolled out full-fledged, there will be budget constraints. So this will be a policy challenge. Next, as this is expanded for all citizens in the city, there will be issue of implementation of how it can be implemented. And negative income tax and SSIP, when it was first designed, one of the intentions of such programs is to replace other welfare programs. That's one of the goals and aims. However, politically speaking, is this feasible? Because one of the characteristics of welfare is that it is irreversible, they say. Once it is given, it is very difficult to take back. So politically, will these systems be able to replace existing welfare systems? And looking at the results, the effect of the policy, it is not homogeneous. It's heterogeneous by groups. Therefore, we need to target certain groups that will show maximum effect. However, if it is targeted, then it will not be a universal program, which may mean that it will be difficult to be embraced politically. And so these are the implications for SSIP. That's all for me. Thank you. So thank you very much. Next, we'd like to invite Min Se-jin, Professor of Economics from Dongguk University. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Min Se-jin from the Department of Economics at Dongguk University. And I wanted to share with you what was happening in Korea. And Professor Lee just mentioned this, but in terms of NIT, I think we have to look at the relationship with the existing welfare programs. And from an economist point of view, when we implement these type of programs, I think the biggest concern is the impact on labor supply. So I looked at that while I was preparing for the material. So if you look at OECD economics survey, and the most recent survey on Korea was published in 2022. It's a report that is released every 2 years. So the next report will come in 2024. So if you live in Korea, it's hard to, objectively view what is happening in Korea. So I usually refer to OECD reports. And it says, and the OECD report looks at the central government's major social safety network for working age population. There are 4 pillars. The first is employment insurance. So unemployment benefit is provided to a worker upon unemployment from the insurance premium made by a worker and the employer. And then we have the National Basic Livelihood Security Program. I think in the yesterday's presentations, we looked at MBLS. So it's the most basic welfare program in Korea. So depending on your income level, you can get medical, living, housing, and education benefits. And then the next one is Korean National Employment Support System. So it's a program that urges people to find a job. And then the last one is in America, I think the most similar program is EITC. So it's earning income tax credit. So this is for low-income workers. So we don't want them to just receive these basic benefits. If they are able to find work, then we supplement their income, and we actually try to increase incentive for work through the work subsidy program. So there are 4 major programs. And local governments, especially Seoul metropolitan government, now is implementing the Seoul Safety Income project, and this is in addition to the central government's program. So I would like to look at the other social safety network programs in Korea. And if you look at this is the employment insurance, and you can see that 50% are not part of the employment insurance program. And this is 2019 data. So with unemployment, people will see a huge reduction in income, but the employment insurance actually subscription rate is quite low. And here in the pie graph, you can see 38% is institutional gaps. And what this refers to is in Korea, we have a lot of people who are self-employed. And then recently, we see an increase in platform and platform workers, so people who work for delivery apps. So there are many different platforms in the market. And so platform workers do not have to be part of the employment insurance. So these people are not insured. And it was covered in Korea, but in 2021 to 2022, platform workers, after-class teachers, they are now going to be covered under the employment insurance. But I think we have yet to see how effective this employment insurance will be, because these people, they don't really feel the need. They're like, do I really have to be a part of the employment insurance? So to expand the employment insurance program in Korea, I think we will need some more time. And also, this is also very important, but this has to do with unemployment benefits. And unemployment benefit, not I think that unemployment benefits actually discourages people from finding a job. So the graph is quite complicated, but if you look on the left-hand side, it compares OECD countries and it looks at the net replacement rate in unemployment. So in other words, just in case you actually become unemployed, it looks at the coverage of how much of your initial wage can be covered through the benefits. So in Korea, we're number one in some things, and in some cases we're like the last bottom of the list. But here in Korea has the highest number. So whether you're unemployed in employment, it means that your wage might not be that different. And if you look at the x-axis, the maximum is 100%. So what happens is that, sometimes actually it might be better to not work than work. So it's quite shocking. So why does this happen in Korea? So if you look at on the right-hand side, this graph actually gives us an answer. So this looks at the unemployment benefit, the maximum and the minimum. Maximum is green, and you can see the minimum is blue. And what happens is that as time passes by, you can see that the gap continues to narrow down. And so what this means is that it doesn't mean, regardless of how much you were earning, if you become unemployed, compared to your original income, you can see that even if you had a large income before or lower income before, you can see that there is not much gap in terms of the benefit. So if you look at the minimum, it's actually connected to the minimum income. And in the past few years, the minimum wage in Korea has gone up. So the minimum is actually very close to the maximum. And so as a result, sometimes it's actually, in terms of income level, it's better to be unemployed than employed in terms of the benefits you receive. So when we look at I think we really have to look at the relationship with the existing social safety network in order to talk about, these type of different experiments or programs that are being implemented. And then another important program in Korea is the National Basic Livelihood Security, and this is also data from OECD. And according to the OECD graph, it looks very complicated, but it has to do with work incentive. So you can see a big portion, this gray part, has to do with earned income, and then you can see the percentile of income, and the purple part is allowance for housing. So it's housing benefits that you receive. And then the green part is it's cash transfer for the low-income families. So it's cash transfer for their livelihoods. And if you look on the bottom, you can see that blue part, and that is EITC. And social insurance premium and earned income tax. So that is the red part under 0, and that represents social insurance premium and earned income tax. And what we should look at is the black line here. So on the top of the graph, you can see there is a black line. And this black line represents what it means is that whether you work or not, depending on regardless of what type of benefit you receive, what happens to your net income. So if you look at the different income groups, there are breaks in between. And once you actually pass the threshold for the housing allowance, you can see that it dramatically drops down. So people might think, do I really have to work? But if you look on the right graph, what you can see is that it used a tool, a methodology that they applied to other countries, and looked at the work participation rate and also the tax rate. So they looked at Social Security, and for low-income groups, you can see that it is very inconsistent. So this is not accumulated rate. So in terms of designing a basic social welfare program, you can see that this incentive to work is not actually elevated. And when we design the sole safety income, this is something that we should also consider. And from that perspective, EITC and this safety income NIT, what is better is something that I think, we have to actually study further. And currently, if you look at MBLS and also the employment insurance program in Korea actually really needs to be reformed. And in Professor Rito's presentation, people who have children under 6, labor supply is reduced. And in Korea right now, we're trying to introduce foreign child care workers. And so I think that with this new program, we will have to discuss this type of change. So I think sole safety income and this new introduction of foreign babysitters or nannies into the Korean system, all of this needs to be considered together. So we also really have to look at the real impact by connecting NIT and these basic security income with the existing social safety networks. And if it's going to replace it or whether it's going to weaken the existing programs, how are we going to actually supplement the existing programs? So there needs to be a lot of discussion and persuasion.
Next, we will be hearing from Mr. Kyung-sun Jung. Hello, I am Kyung-sung Jeon. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this meaningful gathering. I believe that I am the only non-academic on this discussion panel. So I think that I can speak on behalf of the field, and I work with non-government organizations, and I also work in a asset management side. And first of all, I would like to say that SSIP being led by Seoul Metropolitan Government, being a data and experiment based, is very encouraging. I think many people already mentioned this, that ultimately SSIP should strive and aim for alleviating poverty. And income supplementation such as SSIP can be extremely helpful and a relief for those in emergency situations. And it gives autonomy and self-reliance and dignity to these people. And there can be financial burden that is relieved for these people, but this also leads to emotional help and support. But ultimately, for these people to be self-reliant, the payment and transfer that is provided to these people should be connected with other services such as housing and rent support and community services and education and training. And Korea, there are many non-governmental organizations and social ventures and civic groups, and they are providing these various services. I established a non-profit organization in 2012, and I've been working in supporting people through such nonprofit organizations. And we have a space called Hayground in Seongsu, and we have created an impact cluster. What is special and unique about impact cluster is that the work that we do is for social services and for the public good. But the financing comes from private organizations, donations of private institutions, or under impact investment, social
social impact and fiscal impact, financial impact is also pursued through these projects. And the establishment of these organizations and institutions are for both public good and private good. And so they think about providing low-cost services and also increasing access to medical care and health care and also housing and so forth. Therefore, I hope that these types of programs and services can be connected with the recipients of programs such as SSIP so that they can move out of poverty. The recipients can move out of poverty. And I believe that this will lead to a virtuous cycle. And we have an embracement in inclusive finance system. And this is, I think, connected with the discussions that we are having from yesterday and today. We heard about many cases in the United States, and there are community-developed financial institutions. And there are also funds that support this, and there's a Community Reinvestment Act, and credit is provided to these organizations. And so there's a lot of discussions that are going on here. And the theme of today's panel discussion is the role of the government in poverty alleviation and income inequality. I think that the role of the government is to encourage private sector also to participate, and that the private funding and financing can be channeled into these types of projects. There can be various ways and channels and methods for the private sector to participate, whether it be for doing social good or to reduce their tax burdens. One clear thing is that in Korea, considering the work that I've been doing thus far, the public sector is thought to be, public good is thought to be done by the government. So for activities that are done by the private sector, there's not a lot of support, and at the same time, there's not a lot of regulations. So it's more neutral about the activities of the private sector. But there's a lot of activities going on in the private sector, such as social enterprises and social contributions. So there are many young people that are thinking of doing social good as they earn money. So it means that the private sector, there are many players, and they are quite interested in providing public good and public services. Against this backdrop, the government, for the government-led initiatives such as SSIP to have a bigger impact, they will need a lot of funding and financing in order to reduce that burden. One way to go about this would be to increase and to encourage private sector funding and private sector participation. Important activity of the government is to support and help the nonprofit organizations through deregulation. And looking at the case of U.S., when private sector participates in public projects, there can be tax deduction or a tax credit for them. And when there is reduction in the access to medical care, health care, and education, and the housing, that leads to issues of poverty and income inequality, which will lead to more people that have to be covered by programs such as SSIP. And there can be support to private sector that helps in increasing access to medical care and to education and to housing. And the government can help in deregulating and providing tax incentives for private sectors when they participate in these areas. And I think that on top of and alongside with SSIP, these activities that are done by the private sector through the support and deregulation of government will lead to a virtuous cycle. And on a side note, one thing that I find that is unfortunate, and I think this is agreed by many, is that many things will be decided due to political discourse that may not be so tightly aligned with the initial aim and purpose. And when I was working in the social enterprises, was that although the intent was good and well intended, as it becomes political, it becomes a burden for those who are administrating these activities. But I think we need to think about the fundamental aims, such as poverty alleviation or encouraging education. We really need to always think about the purpose and the goal, and we should coordinate with many stakeholders. And I believe that should be one of the roles of the government. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we have about 6 minutes left, and with the 6 minutes, I would like to give the audience a chance to ask questions. So if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. We have the panelist and the presenter. So please tell us who your question is for. So, Professor Riedel, if you look at the research results, I think it's very encouraging. So I would like to ask a question. So with regard to labor supply, when you conducted your research, so did people's, I'm sure that people's income actually goes up before or after the experiment. And because of the income effect, even if your income goes up, then labor supply will go down. And I think we have to control income effect in order to conduct the research. And so did you control income effect? And if not, like how would you control income effect? Because in the long-term welfare recipients, for long-term welfare recipients, then I think that before they receive NIT or after NIT, there will be a change in income. And I think after NIT, their income will go up. So I think we need to control this effect. So Professor Riddell, can you answer the question?
Yeah, of course. Good question. The estimates that we're showing are the total effect. So it's got both what economists call the substitution effect and the income effect. For people that were already in the workforce, who reduced their labor supply, both the income effect and the substitution effect work in the same direction. And that is why economists expected a reduction in labor supply for people that were already in the workforce. And as you saw in what I presented, we do find that. For people that were not working, the dominant effect is the income effect, and the fact that they, rather than just accepting the higher guarantee and staying out of the workforce, which of course some people do enter the workforce because you're replacing a welfare system with 100% tax back rate with an NIT with a much lower tax back rate. For example, 50% tax back rate was a common one, but there were others used. So you're improving incentives by replacing 100% tax back rate with a much lower tax back rate.
감사합니다. 다음 질문. 네.
So thank you, Professor Riddle, very much for interesting findings. Some of them were even shocking. So I have three small questions. One concerns the well-being effects. Do your results converge with what Evelyn Forget found in her study, The Town Without No Poverty, which been very much cited in the among the basic income advocates? Secondly, you said that the study from Hum and Simpson, 91, cannot be trusted. Simpson wrote a book 30 years later is basic income within reach? And he didn't talk about the problems in his previous research. He was citing his previous findings in that book. So how come they got it wrong in 91? And finally, I think your results are relevant in their own right, but why we want to cite those previous studies is that we want to think if they still make sense. So I wonder if you could discuss briefly the external validity for your findings in the current context.
Yes, I'd be happy to answer that question to the extent I can. First of all, Evelyn Forget's work that you mentioned on health effects, we don't analyze that for two reasons. First of all, she did not use in MINCOM. A unique feature of MINCOM was, besides the randomized part, which was done in Winnipeg, the main city in that province, and in some rural towns. So there were two. There was the Winnipeg site and the rural sites. Those were used random assignment, and so those in principle meet the gold standard for credible evidence. There was also what was called a saturation site, and it was the town of Dauphin, Manitoba, and it's a famous town because it has the highest proportion of Ukrainians in it of any town in Canada. And in any event, her work was using health data from people that lived in that town, but it was not randomized. Everybody in the town was eligible for the NIT. All they had to do was apply for it. Now, of course, some people didn't apply because they didn't need it. They were way above the break-even point, so there's no use of having an NIT. But others did, and she found in her work that there was an improvement in the health outcomes in that town compared to other towns where there hasn't been an NIT. Now, I should tell you that her work is considerably disputed by my colleague David Green, who headed up the basic income panel in the province of British Columbia recently that I mentioned earlier. And there's an exchange between David Green and Evelyn Forget in a recent issue of the journal Canadian Public Policy. And if you can't find it, you can just email me and I'll give you the site. Unfortunately, Evelyn Forget has not made her data available to any other outside researchers. So nobody can try to replicate her work or check the analysis if they're skeptical about it. So I'm a skeptic about her work. I know it's been widely cited, but I'm a skeptic about what she found, as is my colleague David Green. Okay, you mentioned the Hum and Simpson. Yes, both Hum and Simpson have continued to work in this area. Simpson has a number of recent studies on basic income. He did a study for the British Columbia basic income panel that I mentioned earlier. However, they cannot explain how they got the results they got. All they say is the computer tape is no longer available, the data is no longer available. My son and I have a theory about what they did wrong, but we don't have a way of checking that theory. But one thing that is clearly wrong is their samples. Their sample sizes don't make any sense. They have a much larger number of control members in their sample than treatment members. But the nature of the assignment model used in the negative income tax experiments, all 5 of them, the 4 US experiments and the Canadian one, guaranteed that the treatment group would be larger than the control group. Now that's it's complicated to explain why that's the case, and I can explain it if people really want to know, but they used a very complicated assignment model worked out by two econometricians. Using that assignment model, which no other experiments have used since then, you get about 60% of the total sample is in the treatment group and about 40% in the control group. So the treatment group is 50% higher than the control group. And Simpson, however, have a much larger control group than treatment group, which just doesn't make, it's just not consistent with the assignment model. We have a view about what they did wrong, but it'll only be known now that their work was flawed when our papers are published. They've been out in working paper form for a little while now. Tom and Simpson are certainly aware of them. We sent them our work at an early stage, asked for their comments, asked access to their computer code and their data, but they don't have those anymore, and so there's nothing more that can be done. I'm not sure we'll ever know what they did wrong, but it's clear that they did something wrong. I hope that answers your question.
감사합니다. 아쉽지만 시간 관계상 여기서 마무리.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, I think we have to wrap up this session. Once again, I would like to thank the presenter and panelists. So today we discuss the direction that the government should move in, and we also looked at the government's role from an international and global perspective. So I'd like to thank the presenters and also the panelists. So with this, we will conclude the 2023 Seoul International Forum on Safety Income. So once again, I would like to thank everyone for your participation. So today, through the presentations and discussions of domestic and international scholars, as well as your enthusiastic support, we were able to explore the future direction of the SSIP income security system and solutions to poverty and income inequality at the international level. And we would like to thank all of you for joining us till the end. The Secretariat is conducting a survey in order to make the event even bigger and better next year. The link to the survey can be found on the banner and on the last page of the booklet. And please, we hope you will take a few minutes to complete the survey. And when you are leaving, please remember to leave your name tag and interpretation receivers where you found them. So I hope that everyone will enjoy their holidays. We look forward to a better and bigger forum next year. Thank you very much. I am announcer Cho Ju-yeon.